Please remember who you are. Good evening and good morning, hooker. If you wanna be a girl in the picture, well, you gotta meet a girl. Open up your eyes, it's time you realize now is the time to shine. The category is revolution.
Happy Pride! You know, most people think December is the most magical time of the year, but I want to make a case for June, because June is Pride Month, and all month long we see parades, rainbows, giant floats, rainbow face paint, fun music, rainbow-themed clothing, Starbucks drinks, among any other item that could possibly be rainbowized. Wow, that's a lot of rainbow. And you know what? It's commercialized. It really is, but it's also a magical time as it brings people together. It creates a bridge across race, class, gender, and sexuality, and it brings people together to celebrate love. And now don't get me wrong, I love myself some rainbow pride gear. But I think the best part about Pride is the fact that we are celebrating a huge moment in queer history. We celebrate because on June 28th, 1969, there was a riot that was heard across the world, as Black and brown, trans and queer people fought back against police repression and brutality, starting the new gay movement in America. And this year is the first year since 1970 that the parades have not happened. Thank you, COVID-19. So I think it's a perfect time to remember what happened on that first year anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising, and go into the history of how Pride became Pride. I'm Alexis Arrington, and welcome to Everyone's Gay, a look into queer history, Pride Edition. So to look at the history of the Pride parades, we've got to go back to June 28th, 1969, when we have the Stonewall Uprising, a series of spontaneous riots that occurred after police raided the Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in Greenwich Village. That night, Black and brown, trans, and queer people screamed, "We've had enough of police brutality and social oppression," and their voices were heard. If you want to learn more about the Stonewall Uprising, make sure to check out my last episode that goes deep into the events of that early morning that changed queer history. But by November of that year, activists were already thinking of a way to memorialize this moment. That's when activist and owner of the Oscar Wilde bookshop, Craig Rodell, along with his partner, Fred Sargent, and Ellen Brody and Linda Rhodes of the Lavender's Menace Group, proposed a resolution at the Eastern Regional Conference of Homophile Organizations in Philadelphia. The resolution read, "We propose that a demonstration be held annually on the last Saturday in June in New York City to commemorate the 1969 spontaneous demonstrations on Christopher Street. And this demonstration be called Christopher Street Liberation Day. No dress or age regulation shall be made for this demonstration. We also propose we contact homophile organizations throughout the country and suggest that they hold parallel demonstrations on that day. We propose a nationwide show of support." You might have noticed how in the resolution it read, "No dress or age regulations shall be made." So why do you think that dress and age regulations are even a concept? Why is this even being put in the resolution? Well, we're going to learn about that in the next episode when we talk about the annual reminders, a homophile protest that occurred every year to remind people that the LGBT community did not have its basic human rights given to us by the Constitution. And they had a super strict code regarding dress and age. But that's the next episode. In this episode, we're talking about Pride. And you know what? All the attendees of the meeting voted in favor for the march, except for the Mashing Society of New York, which abstained from the vote. Pride had been started. Meetings to organize the march began in early January, held at Rodell's apartment on Bleecker Street. At first, there was some difficulty getting the major organizations, like the Gay Activist Alliance, to send representatives, but eventually they had a solid group that was able to work on creating a memorial march for the riots. For initial funding, they sought donations from the national homophile organizations, such as the Daughters of Elitis and the Matching Society, and Sargent and Rodell used the Oscar Wilde Memorial Bookshop in order to solicit donations, while others used their position in the community to gain financial support from other organizations and the community as a whole. The initial planning was classic 1960s, as planners and activists took to the streets, spreading their plans by word of mouth, pamphlets, and other avenues aimed at raising consciousness. Over a dozen queer rights groups were involved, including the New York Area Bisexual Network, which was founded by Brenda Howard. Now, Brenda Howard is more commonly known as the Mother of Pride, as she has helped coordinate a week-long series of events around the day, including a dance and a series of celebrations. Her voice, which remained the loudest, most exuberant, and productive of the time, helped gay activists lay the foundation for all the celebrations of gay pride that we still see today. To mark the date of the Stonewall Uprising, the committee scheduled the date for the first march on Sunday, June 28, 1970. It was to be called the Christopher Street Liberation Day, as Stonewall was seen as the Liberation Day for the queer community. The goal was to cover 51 blocks starting at Sheridan Square and ending with a gay-in at Central Park. After disagreeing about who would lead the parade, organizers decided that a member from each group that participated in the parade and the planning would have one representative at the front of the march, chanting, "Say it clear, say it loud, gay is good, gay is proud." A true coming together of all those trying to make a difference in the community. When the day of the parade came, organizers were nervous to see if people would even show up. But on that morning, around 5,000 people showed up. The march took half the time that was scheduled, due to the excitement of the crowd, but also due to the wariness about walking through the city with gay banners and signs, which basically made all these people come out. Although the parade permit was delivered only 2 hours before the start of the march, participants encountered little resistance from onlookers and the police. In fact, many of the onlookers actually joined the parade, which is probably why the number of participants was so high. Take a look at some first-hand accounts from that day.
We had no speakers planned for the rally in Central Park, where we had hoped to get to. We didn't expect we'd ever get to Central Park.
And we were going fast. People that were involved in it, like me, referred to it as the first run. We had been threatened, bomb threats. We had been, people could take shots at us. We were scared. But as we were going up 6th Avenue, it kept growing.
And I looked back, and there were about 2,000 people behind us, and that's when I knew it had happened. And Peter and I walked the rest of the whole thing with tears running down our face. But that's when we knew we were ourselves for the first time.
The first marches were serious, but also fun. And overall, they served to inspire the widening activist movement across the country and across the world. The Christopher Street Liberation Day, held in New York City, and the Christopher Street West in Los Angeles, held in Los Angeles that same year, repeated in the following years, and more marches started up in other cities throughout the world. In Atlanta and New York City, the marches were called Gay Liberation Marches, and the day, Gay Liberation Day. While in Los Angeles and San Francisco, they became known as the Gay Freedom Marches, and the day was called Gay Freedom Day. As more cities and even small towns began holding their own celebrations, these names spread. And the marches spread internationally, including to London, where the first Gay Pride Rally took place on July 1st, 1972. Today, some of the biggest pride parades and celebrations are held in Europe. The original idea behind pride is that society and public space is heteronormative, or that worldviews see heterosexuality as the norm, and that is what dominates this public space. So these public spaces, the streets of New York, the streets of any city, We're not safe for queer people to walk down and be themselves during this time. When the first Pride was created, straight couples could walk down the street with no problem. But gay couples, due to the way society stigmatized queer culture, were unable to walk down the street safely holding hands. So pride parades are forcefully bringing queer culture into these spaces, into the spaces that are dominated by straight and heteronormative culture. And the parades are saying, we are here, we are queer, and we can take up this space too. Today, Pride is a worldwide event, and despite the radical roots, corporate-sponsored Pride gear and temporarily Rainbow Splash Company logos have become hallmarks of Pride Month, showing how Pride, just like many other things, have become a commercial event rather than a celebration of the history and what it took to get to that point. While this commercialization shows how far the community has pushed society in accepting LGBTQ rights, it also represents how Pride has forgotten its roots. And we've seemed to stop honoring the history of what happened on June 28th, 1969, and everything that came before and after that event, and instead just use it as a way to make money. But in the past years, there's been a strong movement to remember why we celebrate Pride. To remember the oppression by police that Black and brown, trans, and queer people fought against in 1969. And we, as a society, have begun challenging companies to do more. If they put up a rainbow flag in June, we must ask them, what comes next? There are 11 more months left in that year, and what are you doing to help this community during those months? So next year, when we're all on the streets waving our rainbow flags high, remember the radical history of Pride. Remember why we celebrate with rainbow beads and face paints. And challenge yourself to celebrate Pride, Stonewall, and the LGBTQ+ community all year round. Maybe even learn some more history facts. I'm Lexis Arrington. This has been Everyone's Gay, a look into queer history, Pride Edition. If you like this episode, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Also, find us on social media at Everyone's Gay Queer History. We are on Facebook and Instagram. I hope you enjoyed this episode. In the next episode, we're going to go over the annual reminders, which I know I touched on briefly before, but they're super awesome and a huge part of queer history, so make sure you come back. Also, we're going to have a surprise guest, so stay tuned. You know, however you're celebrating Pride this year, while it's not what many of us thought it was going to be, I hope you have a really safe and happy Pride. We'll see you next time.